This TikToker, Nicola Priest, murdered her 3-year-old daughter. 3-year-old Kaylee Jade Priest was discovered dead by police with chest and stomach injuries back in August of 2020. Nicola Priest was 23 years old and from England. She would post TikToks on and off, hoping to gain fame and attention. And while her fans weren't the biggest fan of Nicola, they were a huge fan of Kaylee Jade. And some of their TikTok fans actually did notice some signs of abuse on Kaylee Jade's body, but brushed it off as a child just playing and falling and getting hurt. But little did everybody know that Nicola, as well as her 22-year-old boyfriend, Calum Redfern, were using the little girl as a punching bag. One night, Calum came over to Nicola's apartment in hopes of getting lucky. Kaylee Jade was put to bed around 7 p.m., and after they put her to bed, the couple tried to go into Nicola's room to have sex. But Kaylee Jade did not want to go to bed. She wanted to stay up and play, like many children her age. And the couple began to get irritated by Kaylee Jade's cries to get let out of her room. Both Nicola and Calum get very irritated by her crying, interrupting them from having sex, so they decide to both viciously beat Kaylee Jade. Shortly after the beating, Kaylee Jade begins vomiting repeatedly, and overnight she dies of her injuries. Nicola did call 911, but she waited and called 911 after the child had already been dead. The autopsy also showed previous injuries from previous beatings, such as broken ribs, a broken sternum, and lower leg fractures. And after the murder of Kaylee Jade, Nicola had the nerve to post a TikTok video in remembrance of her daughter, which you can find in an easy Google search. The court was also showed and presented a video as well as Nicola dancing and mimicking a song 45 days after Kaylee Jade's death, showing no remorse. There was also a lot of neighbors that lived in the same apartment complex as Nicola that did testify and spoke on a lot of things that they heard and saw, which led to previous abuse to Kaylee Jade. And at the end of trial, Nicola Priest is sentenced to 15 years, and Calum Redfern is sentenced to 14 years.
Are you interested in the Black Dahlia case? If so, you need to hear this. This is the mysterious disappearance of Jean Spangler. 26-year-old Jean Spangler was an aspiring actress in the golden age of Hollywood. She had dreams of making it big. She had a 5-year-old daughter with her ex-husband, and after an abusive relationship, the two divorced and were in the middle of a bitter custody battle. On the evening of October 7, 1949, Spangler left her Park La Brea, Los Angeles apartment. She was going to leave her daughter with her sister-in-law, Sophie, while Spangler's mom, Florence, who also lived with them, was away on a trip. She told Sophie that she was going to meet her ex-husband to pick up a late child support payment, and then she would be heading on to work for the evening as an extra on a film set. The next day, when Jean didn't return home, Sophie reported her missing. On Sunday morning, a worker at Griffith Park in Los Angeles discovered a handbag police identified as Spangler's in the Ferndale area of the park. The handle was damaged, and in her purse they found a note written by Spangler. It read, "Kirk, can't wait any longer. Going to see Dr. Scott. It will work best this way while Mother is away." Jean's ex-husband was questioned, and he had an alibi that evening. And the only Kirk they could find any connection to was actor Kirk Douglas. Jean had recently worked on the film Young Man with a Horn starring Douglas, but he told police he was in Palm Springs at the time of her disappearance. And bizarrely enough, the Screen Extras Guild told investigators that Spangler wasn't even booked to work that evening. The TV studios had no record of her employment that night. A saleswoman at the farmer's market a few blocks from Spangler's home recalled seeing her that evening and noted that she appeared to be waiting for somebody. Only adding to the mystery, one of Jean's friends told police that Spangler admitted she was having an affair with somebody and she was really excited about it. Oh, and one more thing, she was reportedly pregnant. Police never located the Dr. Scott from the note, but there was a doctor in Los Angeles that was known to perform procedures for women who became pregnant. These procedures were illegal at the time, and he performed them under the radar. Who was this doctor, you might ask? George Hodel, the prime suspect in the Black Dahlia case. What? This is a big case. Go to part 2 for the conclusion. This is the mysterious disappearance of Jean Spangler, Part 2. So Jean is missing, and in her purse, police found a note that mentioned a Dr. Scott. A close friend of Jean's said the aspiring actress was reportedly having an affair and pregnant at the time of her disappearance. Police couldn't find the Dr. Scott from the note, but there was a notorious doctor who performed procedures for women under the radar. Dr. George Hodel, the prime suspect in the Black Dahlia case. The night of Jean's disappearance, multiple witnesses reported seeing Spangler at a Sunset Strip restaurant at 2:30 a.m. Jean was seen arguing with a man that matched George Hodel's description and was later seen at a gas station that night in a car that matched George Hodel's vehicle. The DA eventually looked into Hodel for his connection with various disappearances of these young starlets and were close to arresting him, but he fled the country and passed in 1999. Jean Spangler has been missing for 72 years, and her whereabouts remain unknown. Jean's ex-husband maintained that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. He later took their daughter and moved away. They were never heard from again. Kirk Douglas's involvement in the case was questioned for a while, but there was never any evidence of an affair between them other than that fateful note. So what happened that night? I have so many questions about this case. The note? Was she pregnant, and who was she having an affair with? And why did she lie saying that she had to go to work when there was no evidence that she ever did? Gone girl, gone wrong. This is the case of Sherry Papini. On November 2nd, 2016, 34-year-old Sherry Papini, a wife and mom of 2 kids, vanished in broad daylight. It seemed to have been an abduction while she was out on a run near her home in Redding, California. Her family, police, and community searched everywhere. Her husband tracked her phone via Find a Phone app and found it on the side of a road with strands of her hair. They feared the worst. Missing signs, searches, California and the states surrounding it were being searched high and low for Sherry. This was major media attention. That was until Thanksgiving Day, November 24th, 3 weeks after she had gone missing. Sherry reappeared on the side of a highway. She's seen here on video footage. She was found with a bag over her head, a broken nose, hair cut off, and was chained at the waist and wrists 140 miles away from her home. She had also been branded on her right shoulder. Sherry said she was kidnapped by 2 Hispanic women with a handgun and a dark-colored SUV, even going into detail about their appearance for a police sketch. She said she suffered reported beatings while being held captive. When police asked her what the kidnapper's motive was or why they released her, she didn't know. Sherry's husband and family were relieved that she was home, but law enforcement began having doubts about her uncorroborated kidnapping. One day, the sheriff's office received a phone call from a man who told them that Sherry was actually with him the entire 22-day period she was supposedly being held captive. He said, basically, that it was a hoax. This man was supposedly an ex-boyfriend of hers. According to the DOJ, evidence found that Sherry fabricated the entire ordeal, even going as far to harming herself to make her story more believable. On March 3, 2022, Sherry was arrested on charges of making false statements to federal law enforcement officers and mail fraud. To make things even worse, from 2017 to 2021, Sherry received $300,000 from the California Victims' Compensation Board. Sherry is now in custody and is considered a flight risk. What do we think?
Imagine a husband murdering his wife to produce a horror film. In the early 2000s, low-budget documentary-styled horror movies were super in. Movies such as The Blair Witch Project and Paranormal Activity were prime examples of how profitable and popular these movies could get to be. A computer technician named Blaine Norris wanted to cash in on this opportunity. So he partnered with his coworker Brian Trimble to create a low-budget horror movie. They named it Through Hike, a ghost story. Blaine quickly realized that he didn't have the money nor the equipment to produce such a film. But this is when Brian came in and saved the day by offering to be the cameraman and allowing Blaine to use his camera equipment. They even ended up receiving an $18,000 investment towards the movie. After the investment was given to them, they started casting the crew to proceed with producing the film, but then things went sideways. The first problem they faced was the fact that Brian had multiple sclerosis and that it ended up flaring up so bad within the time that he was not able to walk around with all the equipment or through the hikes that they had to have gone through to film the movie. Shortly after, the investor ended up pulling back his money. And this is when Blaine decided to put everything on his credit cards, but he soon realized that he was in an extreme debt, and no matter how much debt he put himself under, he wasn't going to have enough to produce the film. And this is when the awful Brian came up with a horrific plan. Because of his multiple sclerosis diagnosis, his wife Randy took over the home and worked 2 jobs to keep the house afloat. But this wasn't enough, right? When Brian came up with the idea of participating in the movie and putting up $5,000, Randy said no. All of a sudden, she was the bad guy in the situation. So this is when Brian approached Blaine, asking him to unalive his wife in exchange for $20,000 that he would be getting from the life insurance. Blaine could make his movie and Brian would get exactly what he wanted: more money and not having to deal with his wife. Randy's life insurance was set up for $100,000. On January 10th, 2003, Randy was at work all day while her husband Brian stated that he was going to go out to eat with a friend so he would have a solid alibi. Blaine, on the other hand, was in the Trimble's garage waiting for Randy to get home, as planned by the 2 of them prior to this. Trigger warning for the graphic content preceding this. Upon arriving, Randy parked into the garage and got out of her vehicle. This is when Blaine pinned her down, trying to strangle her. She would pass out, but she wouldn't die right away. This is when Blaine took out a knife and stabbed her over 26 times. Why? He then proceeded to slit her throat. Part 2 of the real-life horror movie murders. Huge trigger warning before we proceed. After Randy had been strangled, slit, and stabbed over 26 times, her last words were her saying a prayer to God. After Blaine murdered Brian's wife as planned, he left. This is when husband Brian came home and noticed his wife was in a pool of blood, so he called 911, playing the grieving husband. You can hear the 911 call. It's annoying. You can find it on YouTube. When the cops got there, they immediately noticed how messy the home was. Like, everything inside of the home was flipped upside down, searched for, scavenged through. Like, it looked like a robbery had gone wrong. Except for the fact that cops started to realize that nothing valuable was taken. All of Randy's jewelry, purse, money, all of Brian's stuff was all over there still. And like I said, it was left behind. If it was a robbery, something would have been taken, but nothing was. Brian, the husband, immediately became a person of interest, but they didn't have anything to pin this on him. That was until they had more evidence, which showed that Brian had sent a text message link to Blaine for a hitman. Like, what? After months of questioning them and surveilling them and just trying to get more evidence on them, they finally got Brian, the husband, to admit to it, and then he ended up ratting on Blaine. They were both sentenced to life in prison. Since the case has closed, a lot more evidence had come out that suggested that Brian was actually already planning to murder his wife a long time ago, but that this whole movie ordeal really presented a situation for it to be done sooner. Randy did literally everything for Brian, took care of him, stayed with him despite his diagnosis, took care of the home, wanted a family with him, etc., and that was not good enough for him. And instead of just giving her a chance with somebody else by divorcing her, he was too selfish for that and decided to think only about himself to the very end. Something that I will never understand. These men are exactly where they're supposed to be, and I hope they stay there forever and rot.